We have a guest waiting on the programme to offer his views to us, geopolitical strategist and diplomacy consultant to the U.S. State Department, John Sitilides, former. You're most welcome, indeed. Back in Washington, we're just digesting that, John, as it were. We've just been speaking over those pictures, just looking at the arrival of Nancy Pelosi. But back in the US, her supporters are calling this high risk, high reward. Now, I've been racking my brains. What's the big reward here? What's being spoken about? Do they really mean that?
Well, first, I think it's going to be helpful to clarify the way the U.S. government works. Speaker Pelosi's visit is not an official U.S. government visit. The Biden administration and the executive branch make foreign policy, and this is not a visit that they have approved of. Speaker Pelosi is the presiding officer of the House of Representatives and has tremendous powers under our Constitution, but this is her personal visit as Speaker and does not represent official U.S. government policy towards China and Taiwan. It's important to make that distinction. This is not a unified U.S. government action, and the Biden administration has made very clear that they don't think this is a wise move by the Speaker. However, many members of Congress, the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, are very strong supporters of Taiwan's position vis-a-vis Beijing. They want to demonstrate strong congressional support for Taiwan's ability to operate autonomously, and that if there is going to be any solution to the Taiwan issue, that it be handled peacefully between Beijing and Taipei, and not through the kind of hybrid warfare or wolf warrior diplomacy that we've seen China exercise against Taiwan in recent years.
It's interesting to think of the ramifications of this from the people in the region, the Taiwanese, the Chinese. Do you think, ironically, it could, such a move, if it's seen as arrogance, really, that she can touch down here and there's going to be no huge implications, that could see people coalesce around Beijing and may even see a rise in support for Taiwanese reunification, exactly the opposite of what this trip was meant to achieve?
Maybe among the most militant members of the Chinese Communist Party, but barely outside of China. I think there is great sympathy for Taiwan's situation. It has been unresolved for a number of decades. Keep in mind that Beijing has never controlled, under the Communist Party, has never controlled Taiwan. And so this is a matter that needs to be peacefully resolved between Beijing and Taipei. But I think, if anything, if China overplays its reaction and misinterprets Speaker Pelosi's visit, which, by the way, she has every right to make. It may not be the wisest decision to make right now, especially since the U.S. is very much caught up in the NATO response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Probably not wise to pursue a two-front geopolitical crisis. But it's Speaker Pelosi's decision. It represents also the will and support of many American people who are
not
concerned
really the
about
military,
China's
John.
belligerence towards Taiwan.
But you had the military say it wasn't good timing, this at all.
That President Biden stated, and we don't know what exactly was communicated, that he was advised by the military that this would be an unwise decision. But that's President Biden's statement. We don't know what the military has actually decided, but we do know that to protect our members of Congress, we've seen a significant deployment of naval assets and air assets with the aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan in the waters, and also a number of aircraft from Okinawa and Japan, to defend American lawmakers who are legally and lawfully going to Taiwan and being welcomed by the Taiwanese government.
Right, but that wouldn't be happening unless they were acting in a belligerent way, correct? That it wasn't. It would have said to have been on the official list of the countries she would visit. She knew this would be contentious. That's why only four other Asian countries were put on this list. It would be folly to argue otherwise.
She's able to go to whichever country welcomes her.
Well, why didn't she say that? Why wasn't that said ahead of time, do you think?
I have no understanding of Speaker Pelosi's itinerary planning. If you can speak with her representatives, and I don't know how to read people's minds.
No, but I'm just saying, John,
but
with all respect,
with
all respect,
the safety of herself and the members of Congress that are traveling with her, because the Chinese are overreacting completely to this situation. There have been a number of other senators and members of Congress who went to Taiwan as recently as last year, and we've seen no reaction like the one that we see currently from Beijing.
But it hasn't happened. This is the highest ranking U.S. official in decades to make such a move. It's got huge geopolitical importance, and that's why it hasn't happened before. The issue of strategic ambiguity is one that's been pursued by Washington from the 1970s. So this is a huge issue, whichever way we play it.
It's a huge issue because of China's belligerent overreaction to the speaker's visit. They don't really have many cards to play here. First of all, she was able to fly to Taiwan. So they've been unable to stop somebody from going to Taiwan when they pretend that they control the island. They don't. And the way that they're responding here is completely to the embarrassment, I think, of Beijing on the international stage. However, it is extraordinarily dangerous because of their response. They have the military capability to make life very difficult for Taiwan, not just while Speaker Pelosi is there, but I anticipate that we'll see very heavy pressure on Taiwan, maybe not the main island, but probably many of the smaller islands that are right off of the Chinese coast, as well as a series, as I mentioned before, of gray zone, hybrid warfare type activities, whether it's cyber attacks, whether it's military harassment, and just extreme pressure ratcheted up by Beijing against Taipei after Speaker Pelosi leaves, to let the Taiwanese people know that they will suffer the consequences when there are these international demonstrations of support.
Yeah, she leaves, and it is the Taiwanese people who may feel the brunt of that anger.
Right.
You say that China has shown itself to be embarrassed in terms of military strength by not stopping this from happening, but is there not the other side of the coin that they've shown remarkable restraint in allowing this to happen in their backyard, because they don't want to ramp up tensions to such a degree that a conflict is imminent and there's no backing down from it? Can you see that point?
I would disagree with that. They have no right to determine who flies in and out of Taiwan. It's as simple as that.
Well, would you expect a similar reaction if Russia flew planes into Mexico or China went to Canada, in their backyard? We can't just put our heads in the dirt and say that this has no importance. Of course it has.
Sir, Russian and Chinese naval vessels come to within 13 miles of American islands and American coastlines all the time as part of Russian and Chinese military maneuvers. If they're able to operate in international waters and international airspace, which is all that this plane has done, then no, there's absolutely no legal right for any other country to stop it. The U.S. can't do anything about Russian and Chinese military operations outside of its territorial waters and territorial airspace. And the same thing applies here with China. The South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits are international waters. It's China's problem that they refuse to recognize the rule of law here.
The US and NATO have spoken about their plans to expand in the Indo-Pacific. John, does Washington view Taiwan as an ally or a military asset mainly?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important for Taiwan to take a much stronger, much more robust approach to its own defense. It cannot rely on other countries alone to defend it. And right now, unfortunately, we don't see Taiwan spending the kind of percentage of its budget to really adopt what we would call a serious porcupine strategy of making any potential amphibious invasion by China of Taiwan as painful to the overwhelmingly dominant Chinese military as possible. Plus, they're not properly training their own soldiers, their own civilians, to protect the country in the event of an invasion. So I think, first of all, it's up to Taiwan to step up its own self-defense capability and then look to see where the United States or Japan may come to its assistance in the event of an all-out military invasion by China, which is not assured. I mean, I would imagine that it would be foolish for China to undertake such a costly invasion when I think Xi Jinping has more in mind a more peaceful or sort of pressurized takeover of Taiwan, exhausting the country under attrition from the military, economically, and diplomatically, so that Taiwan finally relents.
So strategic ambiguity, that role that Washington has pursued, is that now dead?
I would say that Taiwan is an extraordinarily important country or entity for the United States. First of all, it manufactures the overwhelming majority of the world's most advanced semiconductors. Any entity that owns or controls Taiwan basically controls the global economy. And it's one of the reasons why we do not want to see a military invasion or takeover by Beijing, by the Chinese Communist Party of Taiwan. They will then control the global economy for all intents and purposes. We also fear that if China overtakes Taiwan, it'll break through into the Indo-Pacific region and shatter that first island chain that allows for the West, the global West, working with the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, to ensure that China is not able to engage in nefarious activities beyond its coastline. And thirdly, it would be a matter of shock to Japan, South Korea, and other allies in Southeast Asia if the U.S. is not able to maintain a credible security defense of Taiwan in the event of an attack by China.
Do you think after today's touchdown by Nancy Pelosi that American military and assets in the region are now more or less safe?
Oh, they remain safe. It all depends on what China decides to do. Again, the ball is in China's court. We are looking to ensure that international waterways and international airspace are allowed to remain free and open for commerce, for travel, and for communications. The Chinese government is the problem here on Taiwan and specifically with Speaker Pelosi's visit. There'll be an American and allied response commensurate with China's reaction today, tomorrow, and in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay, John, thank you for your time today. John Sitilides, geopolitical strategist and diplomacy consultant to the U.S. Department of State. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, RT